Welcome to the Year in Politics 2025. My name is Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor. We're almost at the end of it, but how much do you remember? This is a second show where we'll take you through the best moments of the second half of 2025 in Westminster. I'm joined in the studio by my two friends, Kevin Maguire, the political journalist from the Daily Mirror, and Claire Ellicott, the Whitehall editor of the Daily Mail. I'm still wearing my daughter's tie she made for me. Do you like this tie?
Nice. That's very
It's
nice.
a very festive tie, isn't it?
It's very creative. There's a future in fashion for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, very proud of this tie. Thank you for that. But I'm glad you've dressed up for Christmas, Kevin Maguire. You've done really well there. You look very...
Ho, ho, ho.
It's a blue Christmas in the Maguire house. But look at the resplendent Claire Ellicott wearing the festive garb. It's great to see them both now. We've been showing you the 12 days of Christmas bloopers, the funniest moments of the year, according to GB News. And here's number 6.
So, Mr. Kyle, can I have an apology, please?
That is Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, screaming for an apology from Peter Kyle. That was regarding the Online Safety Bill, now an act. But the clip is quite funny. The Online Safety Act, it has got people on the right of politics concerned about freedom of speech annoyed, Kevin Maguire.
Yeah, it has. And of course, if you're like Nigel and you want to stay in with the great tech bros in the US, well, you'll be on their side then. And the Online Safety Act puts a responsibility on these. They're publishers, they're not just platforms, to clean up their act. Nigel looked at his hand there, didn't he?
It censors free speech. The Trump administration thinks it's too much. There were different ways of doing it to deal with what children can see on the internet.
Yeah, well, I don't want kids on the internet seeing suicide. I don't want them seeing sexual abuse. I don't want them to have their minds warped off the threat.
We all agree with that, but is it the way to do it through legislation which the Trump administration, Nigel Farage, see as a censorship of freedom of speech, Claire Ellicott?
Well, it's a problem across the world trying to regulate a huge Silicon Valley industry from a tiny country like the UK. Essentially, policing the internet is something that needs to be done globally, not nationally, and that's why the Online Safety Act is very much a kind of Christmas tree build, loads of things hung on it, doesn't quite work, not to keep anyone happy, but it's a feeble attempt to try to...
And there's legislation on Capitol Hill which could see the US trying to or saying to their companies in America don't need to abide by these rules and ignore any fines from Ofcom and so forth.
Yeah, well, that'll be a great confrontation. That'll be a threat to Britain's national sovereignty.
Wait and see how that plays out. Claire and Kevin, thank you. Let's go to our first recap of the second half of this year.
Chaos broke out in the House of Commons during a vote to cut billions of the soaring welfare budget.
I can announce that we are going to remove the Clause 5 from the bill at committee.
And Madam Deputy Speaker, I popped out for a banana earlier on, and when I came back in, things had changed again. So I'm even more unclear on what I'm voting on.
I'm angry. This is no way to make legislation. What an absolute mess.
So the Labour backbenchers had managed to win this battle for now. Reform announced they wanted to send foreign prisoners in the UK back to where they came from.
They will be deported back to their home countries.
On the international stage, France's Emmanuel Macron visited the UK and was given the rare honour of addressing both Houses of Parliament. And President Donald Trump went to Scotland to see his hotels and bumped into our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
But I like your Prime Minister. He's slightly more liberal than I am, as you've probably heard. But he's a good man. He got a trade deal done.
Not without putting his own tuppence in.
This is a magnificent part of the world, and you cannot ruin it. You cannot let people come in here illegally.
As the summer moved on, an unexpected friendship grew between David Lammy and J.D. Vance. And unrest grew amongst the public as an illegal migrant staying at a hotel was arrested and later convicted of a sexual offence against a 14-year-old girl. September arrived with a bang, at least in terms of news. After a bumpy 14 months in power, the government wanted to start phase 2 of its time in office by appointing Darren Jones to the newly created role of Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. The day after he was appointed, the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner had this to say about the purchase of a flat in Hove.
I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened.
And then,
We can confirm Angela Rayner has resigned from the government. This comes moments after the Prime Minister received this report from Sir Laurie Magnus. He's the independent advisor on ethics,
which prompted a wider than anticipated reshuffle. David Lammy became Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. Steve Reid moved to the Housing Brief. Shabana Mahmood went from Justice to the Home Office, replacing Yvette Cooper, who took up the Foreign Office Brief. And as for Deputy Leader of the party, the battle ends up being between Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson. But we'll get to that a bit later. Angela Rayner's resignation took place as Reform was having its party conference in Birmingham.
Nigel Farage has moved his speech. He was going to be speaking later this afternoon at 4 p.m. The time for his speech will now be in 15 minutes' time. He's brought it forward to 1 p.m, no doubt to respond to this crisis at the heart of government.
And please do bear a thought for us political journalists while we scramble to cover the different stories.
Which is going on at the same time. Gosh, Tom.
The reason that I've moved this speaking time forward is because this government is deep in crisis. Not only have they fallen into deep popularity within just a year of winning the general election, but it's become clear to all of us that it is a cabinet of wholly unqualified people to run our country. They are not fit to govern.
Politics has very much moved on now, and the Conservative Party hasn't, and neither has Labour. Both Nigel Farage and Reform are the party of the moment.
Oh, and this was just the first week of September. Allegations of a closer relations between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein had just come to light.
I feel a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered. I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done.
Who knew what, when in number 10? As more details emerged, it ended up being Peter Mandelson who was sacked as the ambassador to the US. Danny Kruger became the first City MP to defect to Reform UK. And Donald Trump was treated to a second state visit by the King.
The British Empire laid the foundations of law, liberty, free speech, and individual rights virtually everywhere the Union Jack has ever flown, including a place called America.
No one could deny that the UK is their best at all this pomp and circumstance. The end of September was the official start of the party conference season, and one politician dominated it all.
Farage, Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage.
Labour didn't shy from putting his own boot in.
I would gently point out to Nigel Farage and others that before we left the EU, we had a returns agreement with every country in the EU, and he told the country make no difference if we left. But he was wrong about that. These are Farage boats in many senses that are coming across the channel.
And Sir Keir Starmer used his conference speech to properly launch the start of phase 2 of the Labour government.
If you say or imply that people cannot be English or British because of the colour of their skin, that mixed heritage families owe you an explanation, that people who've lived here for generations, raised their children here, built their lives here, working in our schools, our hospitals, running businesses, are our neighbours. If you say they should now be deported, then mark my words, we will fight you with everything we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal.
All that happened in 12 weeks in the first bit of the past 6 months of this year, the final 6 months. Extraordinary. It does feel like your life flashes before you sometimes in this political game. Claire Ellicott, to you first. Extraordinary times there. Let's think back to that welfare rebellion, the £5 billion of cuts. There weren't really cuts there, simply slowing the growth in the welfare bill by £5 billion. But a government with a majority of over 160 MPs couldn't get it through the Commons. What is going on?
It was, I think, the key moment where Keir Starmer's authority started to fade away. You saw he wanted to tame the welfare bill, which will be unaffordable in just a few years, and get to deliver some cost savings. And Labour backbenchers had another idea. They decided that there was no way that this could happen, and Keir Starmer again didn't see the threat coming, and it was at the very last minute. They had 120 backbenchers, I think, writing a letter to them saying they were going to face down this opposition, this bill, and it was the moment that you just saw his authority fade away.
Very depressing, Kevin Maguire. If Labour can't cut the welfare bill, who can? Who gets permission to do it?
It's how you're going to cut it. If you're going to take away money from people who can't wash the lower part of their body, I would say that was wrong. As a civilised, decent country, you shouldn't do that. And what Labour...
It was cuts to pick with the personal independence payment.
Yes, that's right. But they put the cart before the horse. They decided they wanted to save $5 billion, so Rachel Reeves, the chance that sums would add up. And then they thought, how can we do that? There is a national, I'd say, panic over rising welfare. The biggest component of the welfare bill is pensions, but the proportion spent overall is still quite a bit lower as a share of national income than it was a dozen years ago. But it's going up. There seems to be a lot more claims from people who say they're all very resilient and suffer anxiety and so on. That has to be tackled. But you've got to look at it in a very constructive, objective way, rather than just trying to cut piecemeal. And opposition parties can come up with huge figures and say we'd save this.
And they are.
But we found when the Conservatives were in power, the bill went up and up and up.
And they fought the last election on cutting £20 billion. Of course, they didn't win the election. And yet, Claire Ellicott, you've got two reviews into welfare at the moment by Stephen Timms, the welfare minister, and Alan Milburn, the former Blairite health secretary. But neither are looking at cutting the bill. It's unbelievable, I think.
This is the trouble, that Keir Starmer brought this bill, Rachel Reeves brought this bill in front of their backbenchers, and their backbenchers faced them down. So they now have no authority to get anything through, and which is why Stephen Timms is not going to even be able to cut the PIP bill as a result of his review.
And we see, don't we, we're going to come to the budget shortly, but we see a choice being made here, it seems, Kevin Maguire, between rewarding those on benefits and taxing those who are working. It's a shirkers v workers battle. I mean, shirkers would be the critical word for...
That's a false battle, because so much welfare goes to people who are in work, families in work, universal credit and so on, even lifting the poverty cap, which will...
I think nearly two-thirds of people in UC are in work.
Exactly, but you can demonise it and scaremonger it by painting people as just being idle and lazy. And
they are. That's what the Tories are doing.
There will always be a minority of people like that, and they have to be tackled. But most people who support welfare are actually at work or are physically disabled.
And we saw Donald Trump there in that film, didn't we, Claire Ellicott, visiting one of his hotels. I was in the room when he gave his, again, a sort of tour de force press conference.
Yeah, well, it's incredible. Whenever he visits the UK, the whole country sits up, and putting him on, him standing on ceremony and doing all the pomp and circumstance. He loves it, and it's a great way of Britain to get him on side.
And we saw Keir Starmer go there with Lady Starmer. But then the issue of Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson was bubbling. I mean, that must be a regret now, this government, to appoint Peter Mandelson as the ambassador, because, of course, he's out of a job.
Oh, it blew up on them. They didn't do their due diligence in advance. You might give them credit in getting some of the worst of Trump's tariffs removed. But look, if you've remained in close contact and applauding or enjoying the hospitality of somebody after they've been convicted as a paedophile, there should be no place in public life for you.
There were also protests at the Bell Hotel, Claire Ellicott, of course. That was concerns about migrants being housed there. And that fed through the summer, didn't it? Just why are hotels being taken over by the Home Office?
Yes.
And then young men arrive, mainly young men, sometimes families, but mainly men, while they're moving in with no real consultation of the local people.
And this, I think, is going to feed through to 2026. It's a huge issue. You see Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, trying to get a handle on stopping the boats and tackling migration. And it will define Labour's time in office, I think, if they're unable to do anything, because the public clearly want action.
Well, wait to see. Claire and Kevin, stay where you are. Let's have a look at the number 5 of our Christmas bloopers.
Don't worry. I'm not about to do a Michael Fabricant tribute act.
That's Robert Jenrick there holding up a judge's wig, like he was a ventriloquist, but he wasn't, was he, Kevin Maguire?
No, well, he wants to be Nigel Farage, but without the beery charm. I mean, it's a remarkable transformation in Robert Jenrick, who was a very one-nation centrist Tory, who's now gone off to the right, because he is the...
He's going where the votes are, Kevin Maguire. What's wrong with that?
Either he's had a conversion or he's just a chancer. You can pay your money and make your choice on that. But
I think he believes what he's saying. He believes what he's saying.
At the time, he thought he could get Kemi Badenoch's job. That's what it was all.
And she has picked up.
She really has.
Ellicott, the Daily Mail, of course. You've been flirting a bit with reform through this year, but you're recognising how well Kemi Badenoch's doing. Certainly in the kind of Westminster bubble we work in, but not maybe punching out of that bubble just yet.
Yeah, perhaps. We've seen her in PMQs doing a stellar job of late, and it has been really patchy before that. She had a very, very good conference, and her response to the budget was genuinely funny. It was genuinely punchy. I think she got about 4.
And we have got some actual policies here. ECHR withdrawal, underwritten by a large document by Lord Wolfson, 180-page type of legal document.
He warned about all the pitfalls, and the European Convention of Human Rights is there to protect us all. We can join Belarus and Russia if you like.
We were all protected before we entered the ECHR. We're all protected too.
There is no doubt she'll be very worried that some of the policies she disowns now, like on electric cars, she'll be very worried when she remembers she was business secretary introducing a lot of those policies.
Kevin Maguire, stay where you are, and Claire Ellicott. It's a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Year in Politics with me, Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor, with Kevin Maguire from the Daily Mirror and Claire Ellicott from the Daily Mail. We saw there the Reform Party conference, of course. Claire Ellicott, it was slightly overshadowed, wasn't it, by the resignation of Angela Rayner?
Yes, it was extraordinary. You saw everyone kind of knew it was coming. We knew that she was on her last legs, and Reform panicked, I think, and they brought Nigel Farage's speech forward by a few hours because all of the film crews were leaving London.
I literally left London that morning.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I had to run out the door and just charge back to shout Angela Rayner a lot outside Downing Street. But Kevin Maguire, on that Reform conference, they kind of... The Reform conference, I think, the Nigel Farage figure overshadowed the entire party conference season, didn't they? Or being referred back to by the PM Keir Starmer saying the Farage boats. We saw Ed Davey with little Lego figures of Donald Trump and Nigel Farage.
No, absolutely. He was the guest of the Liberal Democrats, Labour, and the Conservatives. There's no doubt because his reforms are headed in the polls.
Less so at the Tory conference, where I think Kevin Bennett barely mentioned his name, by the way.
But others were saying, what shouldn't we have a pact?
Yes.
Kept cropping up now, but he probably had less prominence at his own conference than he did at those of the other parties.
Extraordinary, isn't it? And of course we saw Danny Kruger become the first serving Tory MP to jump to Reform UK.
Yes, and he did think that Reform and the Tories would have to form some kind of pact, but he's not one of many in the party, actually. And so it was, I think people were surprised that he'd gone over, but he would have been one of them most likely candidates.
And it was damaging, wasn't it, Kevin Maguire, to see a serving Tory MP with his future ahead of him going across to Reform UK?
Yes, Lee Anderson had done it in an earlier Parliament, but there's two issues on it. One is Reform is like a Conservative Party tribute act, the number of Conservatives it's attracted.
I think nearly 20 now former Tories have come across.
What they need is a few Labour big beasts if they can attract them. But the second thing, I'm fed up with MPs defecting without fighting by-elections. And our party political, Labour have taken them to, you should have to fight a by-election again.
Back in the day, you used to. Douglas Carswell, don't forget. Mark Ruckers, they went from the Tories to UKIP 2010, 15.
That's right, that's because UKIP, Nigel Farage, then could see a benefit in it. Why do they not fight it now? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in Wiltshire, Danny Kruger, Reform was fourth. It's probably not a seat they will win at the next election. That's why they did it. But you should have to fight a by-election.
It saves us money not having a by-election.
Yeah,
and people are sick of this democracy thing, aren't they?
You're putting a price tag on democracy if you think that's the big issue.
It does matter, I think, having by-elections and legitimacy, because the local party is very cross about these defections.
Well, the local voters.
Local voters too.
And we've seen all these other...
But we did see Keir Starmer put his thumbprint on this government by reshuffling after Angela Rayner was found to have underpaid her stamp duty bill on a flat in Hove, resigned. Will she come back? That's for the future discussion, maybe next year's review. But we did see him move people around, didn't he?
Yes, it was extraordinary. It's a case of musical chairs. Everyone got shuffled along one job, which doesn't make sense because those cabinet ministers are all fairly new, so they've only just really learned their briefs, and then they've moved them to different departments. Tried to move people like Ed Miliband, who
refused
fought
to go,
him down,
reportedly.
Refused to go, reportedly. And it just made Keir look weak. The whole thing.
Jonathan Reynolds now as
like a
chief
reshuffle
whip.
for the sake of it.
Moving Jonathan Reynolds is a Durham...
From business to
Durham
chief whip.
Village lad who has a seat up in Greater Manchester. Moving him from business to chief whip and trying to impose discipline was a very political move, because he'd been the architect of a very interventionist policy. He was behind saving Scunthorpe Steelworks, but he'd also signed up to the then package of employment rights, which has since been watered down.
And those trade deals, he was quite successful running into that period,
Well, that was
wasn't
it. He was actually quite successful as business secretary, and he was the only person with a few trade deals. He didn't want to have done anything, really.
He was also one of their best communicators on TV and radio.
Came on GB News a lot. Came on GB News a lot, and now not doing it.
One of the key communicators that they've lost.
They've lost a voice there.
Sacrificed to party discipline.
What was the point of that reshuffle, Kevin Maguire, just finally?
I think it was to try and reimpose authority in Downing Street, which appears to be very weak at the moment.
Okay.
It didn't work.
Kevin Maguire, Claire Ellicott. Let's look at the number 4 of our Christmas bloopers.
My God, they made me cocoa. That's fantastic.
Is this a hot chocolate
Thank
or
you.
a coffee?
That's the nicest thing. That's exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
Oh my God. Basically, this is what we're going to do.
Delicious.
We're going to start
Cocoa.
Remember him? We could have done 12 bloopers about that guy there, Boris Johnson, in terms of humour. Do we miss him, Claire Ellicott? I just think that politics have moved on from Boris Johnson.
Oh, it's a difficult question. I think when you saw Nadine Dorries go over to Reform, and a few of his kind of most loyal supporters now...
Well, Danny Kruger used to be his political secretary.
Danny Kruger.
I mean, literally, key ally number 10. He's now gone to Reform.
And I've no doubt that Nigel Farage's whole thing about the Boris wave, talking about all of the migrants who came to the UK under Boris Johnson, is a bid to try to see off someone who could rival him in terms of personality.
And that does damage Boris Johnson. The Boris wave, the millions who came here legally, not even illegally, legally came here on his watch. And the point about Brexit was our leaders have the power to stop it happening. He didn't stop it happening, and he's copying it, I think, politically, possibly.
He's lost his charm. I think people will just think he looks so dated now. He should have gone out with the T-Rex.
You get one chance.
At one time, people would laugh. With him, now you laugh at him. He looked old and doddery there.
Well, I think in politics, in our politics, you get one chance at the big job, I think. And he's had it, you think?
Well, certainly Prime Minister, and it ended with Partygate and failure after failure, where his own side turned on him and hounded him out.
But that's the crucial thing, that the MPs turned on him. So all this talk of Boris coming back, he'd still have to manage a party, but looks different.
He needs a seat.
But he's lost all his 2019, the loyal MPs.
Ukraine was his big cause. He did very well on that. And then he backed Trump. And Trump is the big threat to Ukraine. He's ruined his own legacy.
He's got to back Trump now, being a former Prime Minister. It's difficult to understand. It's difficult to see how he can come back. I mean, he can do well in the international stage, but it's the nuts and bolts at home where you're...
Yeah, if he comes back, it's going to be in Panto. maybe clack.
Oh no, he isn't.
Yes, he is.
Kevin Maguire, Claire Ellicott, stay tuned. Thank you for joining us, of course. More after the break.
October started with tragedy. after 2 people were murdered in a synagogue attack in Manchester. The Conservative Party conference started with a new manifesto commitment.
If you do not agree with leaving the ECHR, then you should not and cannot stand as a Conservative candidate at the election.
And there was a bigger surprise.
Next Conservative government will abolish stamp duty on your home.
On the international stage, leaders from across the globe gathered in Egypt to try to bring about the end of the bloodshed in Gaza.
The sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity.
But another peace process is still awaiting to get its final sign-off, and that's in Ukraine. In Labour land, Lucy Powell beat Bridget Phillipson and was crowned as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
This fight of our lives that we now face to defeat the politics of hate and division and to reunite the country around our progressive values.
But the division in the party remained as briefing and counter-briefing against the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, made the headlines.
And I think whoever's been briefing this should spend a little less time watching Celebrity Traitors and a bit more time watching Country Farm.
The BBC got into trouble with Donald Trump for a Panorama programme edit of one of his speeches, forcing the eventual resignation of his Director General, Tim Davie, and Head of News, Deborah Turness.
And are you apologising directly to President Trump personally on behalf of the BBC?
We have received communication from President Trump and his people, and we are at the moment considering how to reply to him.
The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, also seemed to have a problem with our national broadcaster.
Let me say this to you. The double standards and hypocrisy of the BBC are absolutely astonishing.
The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, announced to the nation in a breakfast time press conference that difficult choices had to be made in the budget, creating speculation about a manifesto-breaking increase in income tax rates.
It is my job to deal with the world as we find it, not the world that I might wish it to be. Not to commentate or to speculate, but to act.
But that manifesto breach didn't happen. What did happen was the Office for Budget Responsibility mistakenly published its forecasts ahead of the budget, forcing the resignation of its director.
They said they were punishing parents' choices, but it's the kids who have paid the price. They've paid the price for the policies of a party which opted for cynical gimmicks over real savings in our welfare system.
And the 2-child benefit cap, hated by the Labour left, was scrapped.
And so because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the 2-child limit in full from April.
The Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, David Lammy, had a bad week as it came to light that prisoners were being released early from jails by accident. And that contrasted with the former Justice Secretary and now Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, as she announced a toughening up of the asylum system.
We must act too. We will do so by making refugee status temporary, not permanent. A grant of refugee status will last 2.5 years, not 5. It will be renewed only if it is impossible for a refugee to return home.
Back in the summer, the grooming gang scandal had finally got its national inquiry.
I've said to the government at the moment, I think it should be a 3-year national inquiry with statutory powers.
But the selection of the chair proved more problematic and 2 survivors resigned. Eventually, the Home Secretary announced who would chair this long-awaited inquiry.
What is required now is a moment of reckoning. We must cast fresh light on this darkness. The inquiry will be chaired by Baroness Anne Longfield.
And that was the final 3 months of this year. It's been quite a journey. Kevin Maguire and Claire Ellicott, you're both still here. Kevin Maguire, to you, the budget. The budget appeared to go on for about a month. Of course, it was only one day. But we had a speech in number 10 when we were apparently being pitch-rolled for a breach of those manifesto pledges not to increase income tax rates. And then I think we have that almost confirmed by the Prime Minister. That's what they looked at together, and then it was dropped because the numbers came in better. But it was a complete, utter mess, surely.
Yeah.
Even you would say that in the Mirror.
Oh, God, it was a shambles in the run-up to it. And of course, the Office for Budget Responsibility, the watchdog, released it in advance, just to crown...
that was their forecast based on the budget, which became we never knew what was in it.
Yeah, but she was going to break the promise on income tax rates, to raise income tax by 2p, reduce national insurance by 2p and collect extra cash. The figures came in better than she anticipated. But no, it just looked really, really bad. And anything that's going to raise taxes at this stage is always going to be unpopular. But she did lift 500,000 children out of poverty, the majority in families with a working.
And Claire Ellicott, that's right, Kevin Maguire is admitting it there. It's a political budget. She took money from working people, gave it to people who needed it more, arguably on benefits, or maybe not.
Most of those households have people working.
Okay, but...
It's redistributed between people working, and by and large, people who are better off.
That's fine, a Labour budget.
But the preparations for this were laid in the U-turns over welfare and the fuel duty.
Yes.
They'd lost their authority among backbenchers, and this was a budget for the backbenchers to keep them happy. That's what they wanted, the two-child benefit cap to be lifted.
Yes.
And it's wildly unpopular with the public. So Labour was shoring up their support in this budget and not looking at what the country wanted. They put up taxes, they've upset workers, despite saying they're the party for workers, and they've rowed back on all their promises not to come back for more, as Rachel Reeves said before, and you nearly did income tax.
And that's allowed, I think, a way in for the Tory party, because you've got Reform UK saying they would also lift this two-child benefit cap, as done by this Labour government. And the Tories can say, well, OK, whose side are you on? We want to be on the side of the workers against those some of whom aren't working or on lower incomes.
Nigel Farage wobbled on it, and then he said that both parents have to be working rather than just one person working. But if those parties want to go into their next election saying they're going to plunge 500,000 kids into poverty, good luck to them, because you can win the battle on the lifting the two-child benefit cap, but you have to win the war on ending child poverty. Labour haven't done that yet. They've got a big argument to have with people, but you can do it when you explain the majority of those kids are in households with a working parent. So they're not all just sleeping in. They are getting up and going to work like anybody else. They are part of alarm clock Britain.
I want to ask you, Claire Ellicott, about Rachel Reeves. I mean, how is she doing? I mean, she was in tears in a PMQ earlier this year, Prime Minister's Questions. She's had enough of mansplaining. How is she doing? She kind of, I think, really messed up that budget run-in. I mean, is she up to the job?
I think she doesn't look like she's going to be with us forever. I think when she did that speech in Downing Street about income tax, I think she looked rattled, she looked haunted, and I think one of the real things about Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and the two-child benefit cap is they keep talking about legacy as if they've done their time and what comes next is
so you're suggesting that Rachel Reeves may be off. I mean, as you know, Kevin Maguire, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are wedded together politically. It's very hard. Often when one goes, the other one follows. And we did hear, didn't we, in the run-up to that budget, every 3 times a week they were meeting to discuss what was happening. That was Keir Starmer's budget as much as Rachel Reeves.
You're right. One's off, the other goes. As Liz Truss found when his Prime Minister, Jettison sacked when he was...
Thatcher and Lawson. It was the end of Thatcher.
Was out. I think her budget, you got to remember, did go down well. The stock market and the bond markets, these people you borrow money from.
So the cost of borrowing didn't go up for the government.
So she's not entirely dead duck, but I don't think she's long for the Treasury.
Yeah.
This is it. She was treading water. She didn't. She's just buying time. There wasn't anything. There wasn't any reform. There wasn't any proposals for the future. It was just like tax rises that are coming in at the end of this Parliament when they're going to have to face the electorate again.
I think they go together. I think Starmer and Reeves will go together.
And will they actually do those tax rises or not? Because that's the question, I think.
Well, I don't think they will.
Nor do I.
Remember, we're in the middle until 2028 of income tax threshold freezes. The Conservatives introduced in 2021.
They just need growth, but one to watch this year.
They need an election good news story story for an election that is probably going to be in 2029 after the US presidential in November 2028.
With a new president of some of whoever.
Yes.
Okay. Prisoners being released. David Lammy was on the hook there. He was on the PMQs. He was asked several times about the release, about someone, and then it's been a difficult time for him, isn't it, as Justice Secretary?
Yes, and PMQs is so often a quite boring event that only Westminster insiders watch, but recently it's been box office viewing, and Lammy standing there with, being asked repeatedly about prisoners who've gone on the run.
But the question was slightly wrong, wasn't it? It was about an asylum seeker, not about a migrant. But it was still...
Yeah, but he should have... It was a woeful performance by him, and I don't think Keir Starmer will ever want to leave the country on a Wednesday again, so David Lammy can't stand it.
So he'll be still here, Keir, rather than never here, Keir, next year.
But he should have said, look, I'll make a statement, give details later about a prisoner release. That's what he should have done instead of stonewalling and shouting. It was disastrous.
Okay, Kevin Maguire and Claire Ellicott, do stay with us. Here are your next 2 Christmas bloopers. Have you ever tried one of these drugs?
You're literally the 3rd journalist to ask me to say, I've got a complex now.
Sorry,
I know I've put on a few pounds since I became Health Secretary, but honestly, I'm never coming on this channel again. Get Martin on. I want to speak to the organ grinder, not the monkey. God.
Martin's chuckling my ear to that.
What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably...
When somebody cracks a good joke, you've got to laugh at yourself. They must join in the fun.
Again, Rachel Rees, she looks appalled by that joke. A woman imitating her.
Yeah, well, she can't accuse Kemi Paternock of mansplaining.
No.
She like you or me, she can't Claire either. But nevertheless, just go along with it.
Just go along with it. But she looked cross.
Yeah, surely shaking her head, but... mockery is the best way to
respond. I think she maybe thinks there's a sisterhood in politics and we shouldn't have a go at each other if we're women at the top of our game, maybe.
I think she just knew it was a fair point being made.
We saw Wes tweeting there. Now, that was about, I think, fat jabs on the NHS, if you took to put a headline on it. So I may have said, have you been on the fat jab?
Yeah, a bit rude.
Almost everyone in Westminster is, so it's
it's falling off. I mean, that's part of the conversation. I mean, Wes tweeting again, he just does seem to take on the challenge of a difficult question and make everyone smile.
Yeah, that's it. And he can handle questions like that being thrown at him, whereas Keir Starmer struggles a bit. Doesn't really know what to do.
I think Keir Starmer, because he spent so much of his first part of his life as being a private individual with a DPP, security risk, his family was secret, they weren't talked about. He can't really escape that side of Keir Starmer, but Wes Streeting is completely new. He's talking about his own wage and all sorts of things.
It's different generations, isn't it? And Keir Starmer says he finds it odd in his 50s to have to talk about his family, although we do know his dad was a toolmaker and his mother was a nurse, and with semi with the Cortina outside.
I know.
But he struggles with it, and you have to do it, because people want to know about the personality and who you are, as well as the policies and the politics.
And he's trying to do it, Claire. He's joined TikTok, which apparently young people say is a social media channel, Kevin. And a Substack, so he's doing his best.
He's doing
Claire Ellicott and Kevin Maguire. Stay tuned, we're nearly there. The cap will go up by 0.2%, adding £3 to annual bills annually next year. That's in January.
Something about that question. Someone doesn't like that question.
That was me having a near heart attack interviewing the Prime Minister at the G20 in Johannesburg, Kevin Maguire and Claire Ellicott. It was slightly alarming, and the PM looked as cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, the man who, if anyone had any ill intent, would be aiming for him, I suspect, rather than you. But I mean, language like that, your lovely daughter's going to ask for that gorgeous
I was so in the moment asking about the increase in the off-gem price cap. I just was completely thrown by this huge lightning bolt outside where we we were doing the interview. But yeah, that shows how the PM is where he is as a cool customer. I'm doing my job at GB News.
Or you didn't notice.
I had to ask that question twice about the same issue. So we had a lightning off at each occasion. So it was one of those moments in telly, which is I was sharing with you viewers at home at Christmas time. Now, back to the review of the year, Claire Ellicott. We had finally got by the end of the year to a grooming gangs inquiry chair in Anne Longfield because the government had failed to get anyone appointed in the summer. 2 candidates weren't acceptable. Victims were upset. It goes to me the heart of this whole sorry saga. And it really is a very sorry saga. You've got young children, now women, let down by the state. They need to trust who's going to get them justice. And the hope is now, frankly, that Anne Longfield can do it, a former Children's Commissioner.
Yes, and this has dragged on for so long. I think I was talking earlier about covering the local cases, and, they still haven't got justice, these women. And, it was so difficult to find a chair because the victims didn't want someone from, the establishment deciding their fates and talking and trying to get justice for them. They wanted someone they could have confidence in, and I think hopefully Anne Longfield can bring them all together.
And we hope so, don't we, Kevin Maguire? I mean, because it's about trusting authority.
Oh, they were horribly failed. There's a huge class element in it, the working class home, sometimes trouble homes, sometimes in care. And I always think if they'd have been the daughters of surgeons or teachers or lawyers, they would never have been abandoned by social workers and the police, or maybe not been vulnerable in the first place. So yes, but real justice is, yes, they've got to be heard, but the perpetrators, the abusers and the rapists need to be prosecuted, punished and put behind bars.
Victim-centric. But Kevin Maguire, are you happy with the politicisation of some of this? You've got victims who really need the support of the state appearing on platforms with Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, or Nigel Farage. Is that OK? Because it's getting very political, isn't it? And at the centre of it is justice for these victims, no question.
But of course, they'll have a range of political views, and they've got to be free to do as they like. I'm not sure it's helpful, but if that's what they want to do, then they should be allowed, because they've been told and failed too often that they've got to be free to voice their opinions. But you see, and it's why it's always difficult to set up an inquiry, there are lots of different views among the survivors. Some are pro the government, some are anti the government, some will be on the right, some will be left, other from the centre, as long as people do not prey on them and exploit them for their own.
And the political class has failed. These women, the state failed, going back 3 decades, I would say, through Tories 14 years, Labour before that. Claire Ellicott, 60 million set aside for it. It must report on the eve of Kevin Maguire's election day, which is 2029, so it comes back in March 2029. That date can't slip, can it?
No, of course not. And we know there's so many public inquiries where the dates do slip and they run on forever and they cost a fortune. This has to deliver some form of justice for the victims. It's difficult to know what form that takes.
And how does it look? What is justice? They want people
to be held to account, and so many of they were failed by police officers, social workers, people in the community, teachers, as well as the people they were victims of. And we need the courts to do their job, and we also need some kind of justice for them in terms of what happened with the establishment.
Absolutely, 100%, that's right. Of course, just finally, Kevin Maguire, back to that film, we saw, of course, the BBC Panorama, the edit of those January the 6th speech by Donald Trump. It caused eventually the head of news at the BBC to resign, Deborah Turness, and the Director General to go as well.
It was a mistake by the BBC, and we live in an era, there's lots of false information around. It's got to get things right, but at the same time it was blown out of all proportion because it did not change what happened in the US. We know Donald Trump was involved in an attempted coup to cling to office because he lied about the election, claiming it had been stolen from him when he'd lost fair and square. But just as he won 4 years later.
He was badly treated by the BBC, wasn't he, Kevin Maguire?
But it's a tiny thing compared to how he treats everybody else.
But that was you. I mean, tiny thing, says the Daily Mirror over here.
You know it was a mountain made out of a molehill.
But Tim Davie resigned as the chairman, as the DG of the BBC. It's not that small, is it?
And I think the trouble with what happened with the Panorama being edited was it fed into all these ideas that people have about the BBC, that's this liberal, metropolitan elite class who don't care about what the rest of. They have contempt for politicians, elected politicians like Donald Trump. And I think the reason they had to go was because it looked so bad for the BBC and it will imperil its future. It has to negotiate a new decision on the licence fee, and it's a bad timing for the
Well, let's hope the bosses of our own organisations don't have to go when they have mistakes made under their watch.
GB News will carry on throughout 2026, reporting all the best political analysis for you. Thank you for joining us today, Claire Ellicott and Kevin Maguire. It's been great. That was the year in politics as we covered it on GB News. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we have bringing it to you. I hope you enjoyed my Christmas tie. I wish you a very happy Christmas wherever you are marking this season. Keep up to date with our best politics on GB News on our website, gbnews.com. But until next year, from me, Christopher Hope, and my wonderful friends Kevin Maguire from the Daily Mirror, Claire Ellicott from the Daily Mail, happy Christmas and a wonderful and prosperous New Year.